Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to unpack the research, find those surprising nuggets, and really get you well informed. Today, we're diving into something pretty paradoxical, almost mind-bending, really. Picture this. A nation literally built on oil, facing a serious water crisis, but somehow charting a course to go completely fossil-free. It's not just about switching energy sources. This is about survival, reinvention, maybe even a new kind of blueprint.
It really is a story of monumental ambition. I mean, think about it. One of the world's biggest oil producers saying, we need a future without oil.
Mhm.
And it's driven not just by climate concerns, which are there, but by stark economic necessity. That's what makes it so compelling.
Absolutely. And the big question is always how. How on earth do you pull off a shift that massive? That's what our deep dive is about today. We're looking into a specific piece of research titled Role of Seawater Desalination in the Management of an Integrated Water and 100% Renewable Energy-Based Power Sector in Saudi Arabia.
Right. And this study, it isn't just, high-level ideas. It lays out a pretty detailed practical roadmap. It shows how Saudi Arabia could potentially hit a 100% renewable energy system by 2040, which is, well, very ambitious. And crucially, how they could cut costs significantly and secure their water supply at the same time. The real insight, the aha moment, is this integrated approach, managing energy, water, even industrial gas all together.
So our mission here for you, the listener, is to dig into those surprising facts, those moments in this study that make you go, huh, because this isn't just Saudi Arabia's story. It could be a blueprint, potentially, for sustainable development elsewhere, too.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's dive in. Okay, to really get why this plan is so ambitious, we need to sort of set the scene. Think back to Saudi Arabia around 2015. Huge oil wealth, yes, but also facing some serious vulnerabilities. It's a massive country, mostly desert, no permanent rivers, no lakes.
Right. And the water scarcity figures from this study are, well, they're stark. Back in 2015, they had only about 84.8 cubic meters of renewable water per person per year.
84.8. And the global average is...
Around 6,000. 6,000. So it's a tiny fraction, a
Yeah.
really alarming gap.
Wow. But here's the twist, right? Despite that scarcity, their water use was incredibly high, something like 250 liters per person per day, which put them, what, third highest globally?
Exactly. Right up there with the US and Canada. So you've got this massive mismatch, hardly any natural supply, but huge demand. And the study projected that demand would jump another 56% by 2035.
Well, the groundwater they do have.
Yeah, the aquifers, that they're projected to last maybe only another 10 to 30 years. It's fundamentally unsustainable without a big change.
So the obvious answer for a coastal desert nation is desalination, turning seawater into fresh water. But that's always been the catch, hasn't it? It takes a ton of energy.
A massive amount, and that's exactly the problem this study highlights. By 2015, desalination plants were already gobbling up about 25% of the country's own oil and gas production.
25% just to make water.
Yeah, and the projections were worse. Without a change in approach, it was heading towards 50% by 2030. There's anecdote mentioned, I think, from a GE report, estimating something like 300,000 barrels of oil per day just for desalination.
300,000 barrels.
Mm-hmm.
Oil they could be exporting. That's a huge opportunity cost, isn't it?
Precisely. Burning your main export revenue source just to keep the taps running, it's a difficult cycle.
Okay, so that sets up the energy-water nexus problem. Then comes the economic angle. Saudi Arabia's economy, historically, was almost entirely oil, like 91% of national income in the early 2010s.
Hugely dependent.
But then 2015 hit, oil prices slumped, and they faced a massive budget deficit, something like 100 billion euros.
That was the catalyst, a real shock to the system. It wasn't just a temporary blip, it forced a fundamental rethink. And that led directly to launching Saudi Vision 2030. This ambitious plan for, well, their words were a Saudi future without oil.
Bold statement from the world's oil kingpin.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just rhetoric. They set initial renewable energy targets 9.5 gigawatts by 2023, later bumped to 10 gigawatts.
Just to give people a sense, 10 gigawatts is
Yeah.
that's a lot of power, right? Enough for millions of homes.
Oh, easily. And they realized they had this huge untapped potential sun everywhere, good wind resources in places. The government even started talking about solar energy as yellow oil, a new resource to tap into.
And we started seeing proof of this shift, didn't we? Like those incredibly low bids for solar projects.
Yeah, stunningly low, down to 1.78 US cents per kilowatt hour in some cases. That's globally competitive, extremely cheap power.
Plus those huge deals like the SoftBank one for 3 gigawatts of solar plus storage. That showed real commitment, attracted big international players.
It signaled a genuine pivot, driven by that economic wake-up call.
Okay, so against that backdrop, this study asks a really critical question. It's basically, what happens to the cost of electricity and water if you meet your desalination needs as part of a fully integrated 100% renewable energy system?
Exactly. It's not just about swapping oil for solar panels. It's about redesigning the entire system, power, water, and even industrial gas to work together.
So how did they model this? What were the ground rules?
Well, they modeled the transition from 2015 out to 2050 in 5-year steps. A really key assumption, a hard constraint, was no new fossil fuel power plants built after 2015, and the existing ones phased out as they reach the end of their technical life. So a definite end date for fossil power.
A clean break. Okay. And you mentioned industrial gas. That's usually natural gas, right? How does that fit into a renewable future?
Right. So the non-energy industrial gas demand, like for making chemicals or materials, that transitions too. It shifts to what's called synthetic natural gas, or SNG.
Okay, SNG, how's that made renewably?
It's produced using power-to-gas plants, PTG. Basically, you use renewable electricity surplus solar or wind power, for example, to create hydrogen through electrolysis. Then you combine that hydrogen with carbon dioxide, maybe captured from industrial sources, or even the air eventually to make methane, which is SNG.
Ah, okay, so you're storing renewable energy in chemical form as a gas that industry can use. Clever.
Exactly. It decarbonizes those hard-to-electrify sectors.
And for desalination, what technologies did the model focus on?
Primarily seawater reverse osmosis, SWRO. That's the dominant tech globally now. Uses electricity to push water through membranes, and also some multiple effect distillation, MED, which uses heat. The older, really energy-hungry multi-stage flash, MSF plants, those get phased out in the model.
And the MED plants using heat.
Yeah.
Where does the heat come from in a renewable system?
The model cleverly looks for any excess heat generated elsewhere in the energy system, maybe from the PTG process and other components, and tries to utilize that for thermal desalination with MED, maximizing efficiency.
Got it. So the core comparison in this study is between planning everything together, the integrated scenario, versus planning power, water, and gas needs separately, the non-integrated one.
Precisely. It's like comparing a well-coordinated team effort versus everyone doing their own thing. The goal is to see, quantifiably, what are the benefits of that coordination? Does integration actually save money and improve performance?
All right, let's get to the results then. What did they find? Can Saudi Arabia actually hit 100% renewables by 2040?
According to this study's modeling, yes. It suggests a 100% renewable energy power system is achievable by 2040, which is, frankly, a remarkably fast transition.
What drives that? What technologies take over?
It's overwhelmingly solar PV, especially single-axis tracking TV, which follows the sun. By 2050, the total power capacity modeled is huge, around 600 gigawatts.
600 gigawatts. That's enormous.
It is, and solar PV makes up about 377 gigawatt of that. It provides nearly 80% of the actual electricity generated. Wind power is significant too, around 83 gigawatt of capacity, but solar just becomes so economical due to the cost drops that it dominates.
So solar is king, and the old fossil fuel plants?
Completely phased out by 2040. The oil-fired internal combustion engines, the natural gas plants gone. They're replaced by renewables. And, importantly, for backup or peak power, existing gas turbines are kept but fueled with that renewable SNG we talked about.
Okay, but with so much solar and wind, which are variable, storage must be absolutely critical, right?
It's crucial. The study shows battery storage becoming essential quite early. By 2025, by 2050, batteries are providing a massive amount of energy, about 413 terawatt hours. That meets around 41% of the total electricity demand.
41% from batteries.
Yeah, and these aren't just for occasional backup. The model shows them cycling almost daily, 300 to 330 cycles per year. They're constantly balancing the grid, soaking of solar during the day, releasing it at night, or when clouds roll in.
Now, the economics. This is often the showstopper. What happens to the cost of electricity?
This is maybe the most striking result. The levelized cost of electricity, the LCOE, the true all-in cost plummets. It goes from about 139 euros per megawatt hour in 2015, using unsubsidized fossil fuel prices.
So the real cost, not the artificially cheap domestic price.
Exactly. From 139 euros down to just 41 euros per megawatt hour by 2050.
Wow, that's what, a 70% reduction? That's incredible.
It is. The study notes a big initial drop happens just by phasing out those super expensive oil-fired plants.
Yeah.
But even beyond that, renewables plus storage just become fundamentally cheaper.
So clean energy isn't just cleaner, it's dramatically cheaper in this scenario.
That's the finding. And of course, the environmental benefit is huge too. Annual CO2 emissions from the power sector go from around 250 million tons down to zero by 2040.
A complete decarbonization. Okay, what about the gas sector? You mentioned SNG. Does that become expensive?
The cost of gas, the LSOGs, does go up from about 23 euros per megawatt hour thermal in 2015 to around 90 euros by 2050, which is expected, right? Making SNG from renewables is more complex than just pumping natural gas. But the key is it provides a secure, entirely renewable source of gas for industries that need it, starting production around 2035 and fully renewable by 2040.
Right. Securing that industrial demand is vital.
Okay, let's turn to water. How does the desalination picture change?
Well, first, the demand keeps growing. By 2050, the total water demand is projected at a massive 112 million cubic meters per day,
And how is that met?
mostly by SWRO seawater reverse osmosis. That technology provides about 52% of the total water by 2050. The other main renewable option, MED using waste heat, actually provides very little, less than 1% by then.
Why so little MED? I thought using waste heat was efficient.
It is, but in a highly optimized renewable system dominated by PV and batteries, there's just less available excess industrial heat compared to older thermal power plant systems. So electrically driven SWRO becomes the more practical and dominant choice.
Makes sense. And like energy storage, do they need water storage too? Definitely. The model shows water storage tanks playing a big role, especially after 2020. Their levels vary daily, allowing the desalination plants to run more optimally, maybe producing more water when electricity is cheapest or most abundant, and then storing it to meet demand fluctuations. It adds flexibility, just like batteries do for power.
Okay, and the cost of water, does that also drop dramatically like electricity?
Yes, another huge drop. The levelized cost of water, LCOW, goes from about 3.29 euros per cubic meter in 2015 down to 0.66 euros per cubic meter by 2050.
Again, a massive reduction. Cheaper electricity, better technology.
Exactly. But here's a really fascinating, maybe unexpected finding from the study regarding water costs.
Go on.
By 2050, the single biggest contributor to the capital cost, the CapEx, of the entire desalination sector isn't the high-tech desalination plants themselves anymore.
What is it then?
It's the water transportation infrastructure. The pipelines and pumps needed to move all that desalinated water horizontally across the country and vertically up to cities. That pumping cost becomes the dominant capital expense.
That is surprising. So, making the water gets cheaper, but moving it becomes the bigger cost challenge.
Precisely. It suggests that future efforts might need to focus as much on efficient water distribution and maybe even decentralized desalination closer to users as on the core desalination tech itself. It's a shift in where the economic bottleneck lies.
Fascinating detail. Okay, so
Right.
let's bring it all together. What's the big so what? Why does integrating these systems matter so much?
The bottom line, the core finding, is that the integrated approach saves money. Compared to planning power, water, and gas separately, the integrated scenario results in an annual cost reduction of between 1 and 3%.
1 to 3%. Doesn't sound enormous.
As a percentage, maybe not, but in absolute terms, between 2040 and 2050, that translates to annual savings of $500 million to 1.6 billion euros
Yeah.
every year.
Okay, that's significant money, year after year. Where do those savings come from?
Primarily from flexibility. Because the desalination plants and the PTG plants can adjust their consumption based on when renewable energy is abundant and cheap, the whole system operates more efficiently. You can use more of that variable wind and solar power directly, which means you curtail or waste less renewable energy. The desalination acts like a flexible load.
Ah, so the water plants help balance the grid, in effect.
Exactly. Which in turn has another benefit.
Which is?
It slightly reduces the amount of storage infrastructure needed. Specifically, the study found the integrated approach reduced the required power-to-gas electrolyzer capacity by about 1% compared to the non-integrated setup. Every bit of optimization helps when you're building at this scale.
Right. And we should probably circle back to subsidies. You mentioned the 2015 costs were unsubsidized. How does that context matter?
It matters hugely. Historically, Saudi Arabia sold energy domestically very cheaply because of heavy subsidies. This study uses the real international market prices for fossil fuels in its 2015 baseline. The study points out these subsidies represented major economic losses in the form of opportunity costs, money lost, by not exporting that fuel. So this transition to cheaper renewables isn't just about lower operating costs. It's also about eliminating that massive opportunity cost, freeing up resources for economic growth. It meets growing demand without that economic drag.
Okay, so this isn't just an environmental plan. It's a compelling economic strategy, too.
Definitely. And that has implications beyond Saudi Arabia, doesn't it?
That's the connection to you, our listener. If a nation so synonymous with oil finds a technically feasible and economically advantageous path to 100% renewables by integrating its systems,
It adds powerful evidence to the case that these transitions are possible and even beneficial almost anywhere. It shows that 100% renewable systems aren't just a pipe dream. They can be engineered to be reliable and cost-effective, even when dealing with complex challenges like water scarcity.
so the big takeaway for you is really this. This study maps out how Saudi Arabia could potentially achieve this massive transformation: 100% renewable power, secure water, and industrial gas, all at a lower cost. And the key ingredient: integrated planning, thinking about power, water, and gas not as separate problems, but as interconnected parts of a single system.
It really underscores a shift in thinking, moving away from managing resources in silos towards optimizing integrated systems for resilience, efficiency, and sustainability. That cross-sector collaboration seems crucial.
Which leads us to a final thought for you to ponder. If an oil giant like Saudi Arabia, facing existential water challenges, can seriously model a future powered entirely by renewables, solving energy and water crises together through integration, what does that signal for other countries, especially those facing their own complex energy, water, or climate challenges? It really highlights that maybe radical integration, looking at the whole system, is the kind of thinking we need for truly resilient, sustainable societies everywhere. And that concludes our deep dive today, based on the research paper: Role of Seawater Desalination in the Management of an Integrated Water and 100% Renewable Energy-Based Power Sector in Saudi Arabia. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.